So we're very delighted to gather here for Gallery Weekend Beijing, and very warm welcome to Cao Fei. We're going to do a polyphonic interview today with my colleagues and friends, Philip Tinari and Daniel Birnbaum. And maybe we can begin with Phil, Daniel, and myself to talk a little bit about the beginnings, how we all met Cao Fei, because I always remember it was in the early 2000s, and we were working, actually late 90s, early 2000s, we were working with Hu Han Ru on the last steps of Cities on the Move, the exhibition which we did about Asian cities. It was actually not an exhibition about cities, it was an exhibition as a city. And I got a phone call from Han Ru, super excited, calling me from Guangzhou, and he had visited studios at the Art Academy, and he was totally, really enthusiastic, and he said, I know I have met the genius. And that is really the first time I heard about Cao Fei. Phil and Daniel, what are your first encounters with Cao Fei's work?
I mean, I know it's really through Hu Han Ru also, and then through you, because I remember every morning in 2003, you know, a few weeks before the Venice Biennale opened, you and I, Hans, had coffee every morning on the corner of Venice, and I was installing a part of the Venice Biennale called The Lace and Revolutions with, you know, Warhol and Richard Prince and Katie Nolan and all of that. And you were involved with the a Utopia station, and at the same time Hu Han Ru was involved, very active, and because he had invited more artists, I think, than anyone else. It was an unbelievably dense show that he did as part of the Venice Biennale 2003, and we followed everything, and that's the first time I encountered Cao Fei's work, and rather soon after that Cao Fei as a person also. And you know, and then we, you know, I always followed it with great interest, but the only time I worked with her relatively early was in a group, a big group show, which was also curated by many people, and that was, and again with you, Hans, and several other people, for the Moscow Biennial, and then also for a show in Japan, in Yokohama, and then strangely enough, I mean, I have to mention this because some of us, Beatrice Rufus not here, great friend and colleague, and you, Hans, and me, we showed up inside a piece by Cao Fei, which was first a little bit shocking and embarrassing because we were some sort of avatar dancers. But, you know, first I met her, then I met myself inside her work. So that's the answer.
YMCA.
Yeah, that was 2000, a few years later, I think 2000, maybe 8.
2009, the Yokohama Triennial, 2009, right?
Yeah, maybe 2009 even. Yeah.
No, it was 2008 because I remember the economy was crashing right as the Triennial was opening, like in September of that year, right?
Yeah.
And then, but I think we met for the first time in 2002, and it was right after. It was actually just maybe 1 or 2 weeks after I first met Hans Ulrich, which was at the Guangzhou Triennial in 2002, which was curated by Wu Hong, and was really the first time that a lot of what had been kind of very cutting edge, even controversial art was allowed inside a state museum. So this was a really important moment in the early 2000s. Ho Han Ru and Hans Ulrich curated the second edition in 2005. But anyway, this was this kind of open moment in Guangzhou, which is also Cao Fei's hometown, that she was coming from. But actually, when we first really met and talked for the first time, it was in Beijing. There was a dance performance curated, choreographed by Wu Wenguang at a children's theater, actually, like deep in the Hutongs. It's very experimental dance performance, kind of talking about the migrant population and urbanization. And am I right? You had curated, you kind of had done like a video intervention with the dancers. So it involved, I think, even filming people in the lobby coming into the theater and then projecting them onto the stage. And then there were kind of all different sort of, I mean, it's actually not a piece I've ever really seen you talk about since then. But anyway, I remember we met afterwards in kind of like the green room with some of the dancers in very late 2002. And, you know, I've been in conversation ever since. I didn't even have a job then. I was like 1 year out of university, just kind of living in Beijing because we're, you know, I'm just a few months, we're Cao Fei and I are almost exactly the same age. She's just a few months apart. So it was a long time ago, but a kind of beginning of a conversation.
I'm so glad, Phil, you bring up the performance and the dance connection, because it's actually something which today is not so known about Cao Fei's work, that there is this background with dance, and that there have been, you know, in the early work, quite a lot of performances. Can you tell us a little bit, Cao Fei, about your beginnings with dance and about these early performances? Because I think it's interesting to revisit that.
So you can see my very early piece, I show in MoMA PS1 is the most early piece, 1995, called Little Spy. 用中文叫星星之火，就是毛泽东说过一句很重要的话，Phil 可以帮我翻译一下啊，就是星星之火可以燎原。你可以翻译这句话吗？
It's like the piece from 1995 was called "A small spark can start the revolution, can burn brightly." It's like a famous quote from Mao.
Yeah, so that is very early piece performance at school at Guangzhou Academy of Fine Art. So that's why Klaus Bissenberg want to include in this very early piece, more early than the first video. Imbalance 257, including this solo show. So also, I think Hans saw my performance in the second edition of Guangzhou Triennial 2005.
Yeah.
The PRD and Anti-Hero.
Can you tell us about that performance? Yeah, I have vivid memories of that. It was very theatrical, really spectacular. It would be great. Again, you know, it's a piece which today is not so known. So it's great to hear you talk. I'm really glad Phil brought up this performance part. I think it's very interesting.
I remember that, yeah, Phil also in that triennial, right?
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. It was amazing. I mean, before you tell us about it, the incredible thing was you did this whole spectacle in the auditorium of the museum, which was normally used for very, you know, straightforward, even maybe boring, you know, press conference and these kinds of things, and you totally occupied it and turned it into this very festive, hundreds of performers, I think.
Yeah. So after I graduate, so I don't have too much chance to directing performance theater. So I think the chance is the Guangzhou Triennial to give me a space, even very small stage. So I leading like a 70 student and friend together to perform this Cantonese language. Leading use Cantonese language is like a theater. It's like combine of like a pop show, Hong Kongese drama. It's all together, and the story is very mixed, all about the Pearl River Delta history, and so. It's very funny and very how to say entertaining performance. I remember at that year many Beijing artists and Shanghai artists came for the theater, but they totally don't understand because we all speaking Cantonese. So because in China have Mandarin and Cantonese, so this theater is we focus on Cantonese culture, Canton history. Yeah, so the story about why we're calling an anti-hero is because in China is especially like my father is doing all this mainstream hero model from Chinese government. So from another opposite way, I thinking about like different people, even like a common people, and even like a anti-hero in the history. They are all is standing from different side and combine of this whole South history of China.
And who were your inspirations for these performances? I mean, where did it come from? I mean, Panofsky says the future, you know, is often invented with fragments from the past. So it would be interesting to hear a little bit who at that time inspired you, who were the artists you looked
yeah,
at.
I think it's not directly inspire me, but it inspired me. I think that 2002, I saw a theater in Berlin. Also, it's my first time visit Berlin. That is Sasa Vaz. It have a show in Berlin. So I forgot the name of the theater, but it's like a free space, no seats, everybody running away in the space. I need to check out the title of that performance, but I think
was it How? Was it the theater called How? There's a really great experimental theater, How, like it was called,
Yeah.
HAU.
Could have been there.
No, I don't think.
No, okay. I just remember I remember seeing her at your performance. That's why I say.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know who is Sasa Vaz, and I never saw her work before I visited Berlin in 2002. So also my first travel in Berlin. Only 3 days in Berlin. So I just buy a ticket. I would just want to see theater in Berlin. I think that year I just graduated for 2 years. After I finished Sasa Vaz Theater, I just talked to myself. I remember I have a diary. I write in my small notebook. I say I want to do my own theater. Yeah, after I saw that piece.
Great.
Now we wanted today to talk about the exhibition at the Serpentine, which I curated with Joseph Constable, and of course, where Daniel and Acute produced and curated this amazing piece with virtual reality, according to Marina Abramovic, the best VR piece produced by a visual artist so far. So we wanted to talk, of course, about technology with Daniel and you, and then at the same time also with Phil about the future and about the next exhibition after London, after the show at the Serpentine, which is the big exhibition in Beijing, your biggest exhibition so far in Beijing, which Phil and you are working on. So maybe we can move on from the past, to the extreme present, to this exhibition. It's of course an exhibition which started in March. It started just before the lockdown, about 10 days before the lockdown, and it's an exhibition which has been closed ever since, for now almost 2 months, which is very strange because it's a quite eerie idea that the exhibition is there, but we can't go there, no one can go there. It's also particularly eerie related to the science fiction aspect, of the exhibition and the whole idea of time traveling. And we of course hope that later this summer we can reopen the show and then prolongate it so that that visitors can see it. Now, in this exhibition, Cao Fei, you bring together lots of different dimensions of your interdisciplinary practice. We talked about performance in this exhibition. It's cinema, it's sci-fi, it's urbanism, it's utopia, it's dystopia, and it's of course also technology. Can you tell us a little bit about the exhibition at the Serpentine and about the film, which is in the in the main room, in the central room, which is your science fiction film?
The show we call like blueprint. I think I have this discussion with Hans Ulrich for a long time, right? How we picked up blueprints. So in the show, we have some of the old pieces like Who's Utopia and Latin and HN1, and that is HX Nova project with all the archive. And the new piece is the entertainment wave, war with Daniel Birnbaum, Acute. So I think this is very rich content in Serpentine. I think the very important is the Hongxia project moved to London. And look at today and look at the Hongxia right now, it's like a wasteland. And the show only opened 2 weeks, and then it's totally closed, the museum. And can you imagine, now in the museum is dark, as with all the Hongxia material, half central material in the space. It's the light is closed, and also the recession, also the side, the golden side, it's like another wasteland. It's like a mirror of the real Hongxia cinema in Beijing right now, because the world now is totally stopped. So I think it's very interesting. Even the show is closed, but it's also a reflection our contemporary condition right now through the Latang project and even the Hongxia project, and even the Whose Utopia Asia one is, I think it's very meaningful for reason.
Now I wanted to ask you more about Nova before we then talk also, of course, about the VR piece with Daniel, because Nova is very directly inspired by the individual and collective histories of this community of a district in the northeast of Beijing, which is called Yuxiangjiao. It's informally known, as you said, as Hongxia, and that is the place where your studio is located. What I found very fascinating when we visited you there a couple of years ago and started the conversations about the Serpentine exhibition is really this idea that it's a whole neighborhood in Beijing where we can see the beginning of the internet in China, the beginning of a technological evolution or revolution in China, initially very much also fueled by the connection to Russia. And it's of course interesting because the traces of this history are and were and are about to disappear. And it's almost like that you as an artist / historian saved the history of not only this building and this, but of the entire neighborhood, and maybe actually the history of the arrival of technology in China. And it's interesting because somehow 50 years earlier, the Bechers, Hiller and Bernd Becher, had a similar endeavor in Germany because they documented the whole history of the industrial architecture after the war in Germany, just at this very moment when it was about to be destroyed. And without the Bechers, we would today not have actually a memory. We would not have images of these, industrial architectures they documented. And that's really what came to my mind during that first studio visit in your studio, is this idea of, protesting against forgetting, saving really also this history. Can you tell us a little bit about his work? Because it's a very long work you've been doing as an artist historian on these histories.
I remember you sent me the catalog to me, right, from Serpentine. You mentioned artists who in Düsseldorf.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Hongxia project is the longest project, more longer than the R&B City. R&B City project is from 2007 to 2011, almost 5 years, and this project is similar. If I think the Hongxia cinema, I start to have this idea is after I rent this space, it's kind of occupied this space by personnel. But even like that, it still belong the group. I mean, belong the government, belong the country. So I use this gap, I mean the time gap before the cinema demolished. I think about to use this several years to document or archive and these demolishing periods and observe the cinema and electronic history who behind the cinema. So because like 798, 738, all this factory is belong the government who work in the Cold War after 1949 until 70. I call it like a Chinese Cold War time. So many this government factory is start to build up a lot of electronics, but nobody know. I mean, even like not for public, it's all for the ministry. And the cinema is service for this employee of the factory. But before I renting this space, I don't know anything about this space, about the cinema. I think just it's old cinema. So after the 5 years occupied the space, I digging a lot of history story behind that. I think the cinema is for the local people, for the neighborhood, is very strong memory to them. But for me, I'm from Guangzhou, from the south, is not a Beijing people. I think that the emotion for me is not like a neighborhood. They live there for more than 50 years. So they born in this street and watching the movie in the Hongxia cinema. But for me, when I came, already it's wasteland, it's waste space. And I'm more interested in people emotion and also the ongoing Beijing city planning, urban planning, how we go. And also interesting like what I mentioned, electronic history of China. Because this history is, people is not familiar with this history, and also, but also this strongly connect today the new technology like Huawei. This Huawei is like belong government, and 民营怎么说 Phil?
Like private or civil?
Yeah, half private, half government. You don't know. But all this is if we say this government technology is controlled by the government, it's same as what I did the history archive. It's like who behind the cinema. It's all the Chinese government control electronic. And this electronics like first computer and huge computer, and also the first bomb, the first 卫星
satellite.
That first satellite in 1970, before the Cultural Revolution. And then it's very interesting, connect today, I mentioned like a Huawei, and also the trade war between China and American, and stop a lot of this important, how to say, 芯片, SIMs.
Yes, silicon chips.
Yeah, we like a disconnect to build up this high technology in China again. It looks like in 1950, China is developed the high technology by themselves, only by every small contractor, they only do by themselves. But like if you connect today, you can see it's like a loop. You stop the connection with other country and develop by ourselves, like Huawei, what doing is right now. So I think it is, even when I digging the Hongxia cinema history and the Chinese technology history, I think for me is all meaningful for future, or is bringing up this pairing or history to show the people again, we have this history, we have the computer history, we have electronic history, and that is all strongly connect today. It seems the history is going to public. I mean, Huawei is like public, right? It's like a cell phone, it's like a big brand, 就是更民用化。Phil 可以帮我翻译一下吗？就是华为其实现在更为民用化，而当时我记录的这个历史可能更为是一个更为实验性的一种更军事化的一个实验性的一个过程历史。它今天是一个连续关系，只是那段历史被抹掉了。
Yeah, basically that like this whole earlier history of state and even military-driven electronic experimentation and production resurfaces today, and companies like Huawei, which are also quite state-driven, but that are seen as more private or more, kind of like modern corporations, and that they're more directed towards consumers instead of towards, the military. But they're faces of the same kind of trend of China's self-reliance in this electronics sector.
So
Right.
yeah, so it's the Nova is, I think is mixed past, recent, future. Is a story talking about all of this. It's not only about cinema. The cinema only is the stage for the whole history.
Exactly, and that's why we thought we would actually structure today's conversation in 3 chapters. First, me asking you questions about the Serpentine show, which Joseph and I curated. Then part 2 will be Daniel Birnbaum discussing with you the AR piece, and then the future, Phil discussing with you the exhibition, forthcoming exhibition for next year in Beijing. A few last questions about the show before I will then hand over to Daniel for the discussion about the AR. I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit more about Nova, the central film in the exhibition, because of course Nova has to do with this time traveling, with the past, the present, the future. And I just thought it would be great that you tell us a little bit more about the plot of the film, because of course there is the story of the scientist who basically attempts to turn humans into digital mediums. It reminded me also of Anton Zeilinger, my friend from Austria, who is the great expert in teletransportation, and he came once to a conference we did called Bridge the Gap with a little suitcase, telling actually that he could teletransport people with this experiment from one place to the other place. The only problem is, of course, that with teletransportation, you do not know if the person gets stuck in the middle, and that's exactly what happens actually with the scientist, is that his son somehow gets stuck in the middle. It would be interesting to hear about that, about the plot, about the fictional city, Nova, because again, it's about the city, because of course already your previous project at the Serpentine, which we showed 10 years earlier, the R&B city, we showed that for 1 year in the lobby, and actually 1 million people experienced your R&B city at the Serpentine 10 years ago. That already had to do with the city. Again, in Nova, the city is important. There is a fictional city. So it's about the plot of the scientist, about the city. And then also, last but not least, I wanted to ask you to tell us about the ghosts, because Marcel Duchamp talked about the guests, the ghosts, the host, something I always thought is very wonderful in relation to exhibitions, the guest, the host, the ghost. And of course, all these 3 elements are in the show, and there is actually a ghost, a digital ghost. The scientist's son becomes this ghost, and that not only allows the narrative to travel in time, but also becomes, in a way, I would say, a specter of history and also of ideology.
About a teleport, about the time travel. So if we look at 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, the Second Life project, so you use your avatar. The avatar is sometimes, if you're not touching your computer, your avatar in the computer is like a ghost. It's empty body, is made by pixel, right? Made by photo, image, your body. So I think it's like avatar. Sometimes we say avatar, is it have a spirit or represent your spirit of yourself? Is it a ghost? When we close the computer, is it your avatar is active? So so I will think about the ghost behind your avatar. And also in Second Life, we have time travel. You can travel here and there from R&B city to another city and to another garden and to another town. So I think if you relate the Nova project, I think the time mix is not a border for me. If you look at another piece, like even Asia one, is also talking about the 2021 factory. And And another project, another film, Prison Architect, and also talked about the 40 years ago prison and the contemporary architect have a dialogue in the same space in the prison. So for the Nova, I think first of all, the scientist's father to push his son in the computer to transfer to goals, digital codes. I think something is, I reference a lot of novel from Russia. I mentioned with Daniel Birnbaum last time. Before the film start filming, I read a lot of novel in last century, 19th century, like 1920, yeah, Russia novel, and also reference Tarkovsky's film. Yeah, last time I also talked to Hans Ulrich. So I think
so Tarkovsky, it's good that you say that again for today's interview, you know, that the influence of Tarkovsky, I think is very interesting.
You want I mention his name again?
Yeah, I think it's nice for this interview, no?
Yeah, I think, but I know Tarkovsky, his name for a long time, but actually I never saw his film before Nova, because I don't think he's my taste kind of director, because I'm more interested in other director. But before I do research for Nova film, I have to read a lot of science fiction novel and film. So that is Tarkovsky's film. I think is so attract me. Yeah. So I think maybe Phil can help me to translate a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, because sometimes
Yes.
some complicated.
Okay, no problem.
就是他父亲不是将他孩子放在那个计算机里面嘛？那么我想你也是一种某种隐喻，像当时苏联的这种对未来主义的这种这种未来主义的这种，包括宇宙主义的这种象征。人类没有乌托邦以后，要追寻这种象征，所以可能他不惜要牺牲特别多的东西。所以我觉得在这个里边，可能这种牺牲也是象征了我们所谓的某种宏大，为了宏大的愿景的某种一种牺牲吧。
Right, like the idea that the father's, giving his son over to this computer is kind of representative of the sacrifices that were made in the name of, this like very grandiose universalist technological vision, by people of that socialist time. I think.
And you're talking about ghosts, right? Because
the ghost. I would love to hear about the ghost. I mentioned Duchamp, the guest, the host, the ghost, and the son becoming the ghost. What's the role of the ghost? Can you tell us about the role of the ghost?
Because from the south of China, it's more belief like a ghost. And Cantonese, like every year you need to go to the temple to give your breath to the Buddhas, right? You need to burn a lot of money in the ghost months, like August, July, August. So I think this traditional minds really, influence me a lot. So like when I film a new film, before I start the camera, we will order a roast pig, and we hope the whole filming process will be very lucky. So that is all traditional idea about we need the energy from the ghost, but that is good ghost to help people, how people making things smoothly and lucky is like the ghost, feng shui, like this. I think this Chinese traditional is very interesting. So we can see also in the VR also have like a digital ghost. You don't know it's the ghost or it's not a ghost. Or when you put on your VR glass, you are the ghost because you can't see your body. Sometimes you can see your transparent hand, but you can't see your body. Is it you are the ghost, or the people you met in the VR is the ghost? Like Ulliver make a bird, digital bird is, and digital sun and digital rainbow. It's very strange. Is it a ghost? No. So I think today is really mix our experience from 3-dimension to 4-dimension, because people talking about human in the earth is in the 3-dimension, but the goal is 3.5 dimension. The five dimension is the alien. So human is 3-dimension. Very interesting. The goal is 3.5. So because you can't see their body, it only is like cloud, it's like the air, you know, but with thinking and energy. So, but in the Nova, the goal is a young boy, is older son, and travel no limits from year to year, from time to time, to observe the society changing, to observe the father from the young to the old, and to the end, rebirth. So, yeah, I think the goal is never dying.
Maybe
the ghost is never dying, and that really is a transition, Daniel, to the AR part of the show. I mean, I love how in the film time and time traveling is rendered. No, throughout the film, we see the recurrent subject of the tunnel. The tunnel is really also what connects the film then to the AR. We hear the news on TV mentioning historical date, and then the narrative really curls, you know, between the different temporalities. And it's really exciting that we now can talk about this AR part, because the exhibition has 2 rooms where, sorry, I need to start that sentence again, edit. It's VR, not AR. I keep mixing it up. So begin of the question again. It's very exciting now that we can make the transition to Daniel Birnbaum. This is an interview in 3 parts. These were my questions to Cao Fei about the exhibition at the Serpentine. Part 2 will now be Daniel Birnbaum, Artistic Director of Acute, in conversation with Cao Fei about the virtual reality part of this exhibition. And then we will have in part 3, Philip Tinari, Director of UCCA, discussing the future exhibition in Beijing. It's very much, as Douglas Gordon says, 3 steps to heaven, or as in French one would say, jamais 2 sans 3. Now, it's interesting in terms of the VR, Daniel, because of course, we have had many previous collaborations, pre-technology also since more than 20 years, but now over the last few years, particularly related to technology, we started at the Serpentine what we call NEAT, the New Experiments in Art and Technology. That is, of course, connected to Billy Kluwer and his experiments in art and technology, where artists like Lilian Schwarz or Rauschenberg or Stella would actually be brought together with engineers. And I think we feel that in our time, it's important to do these new experiments in art and technology and have artists experiment with AR, with VR, with AI. We had projects at the Serpentine more recently with Jena Sutela, with Jakob Knut-Steensen, Hito Steyer, Pierre Wieg, and of course, this collaboration now with Cao Fei, and then also Bob, the Bag of Belief, where Ian Cheng created an artwork with a central nervous system. I was actually thinking the other day also of the show Philippe Pareno did, you know, at the Musée d'Art Moderne in 2002, Alien Seasons, where in a very premonitory way, Philippe brought in Jaron Lanier, the inventor of virtual reality, to kind of do a time code with him where a cuttlefish would activate the entire exhibition. But here it's very different, because here at the Serpentine, it's 2 kitchens, and you're now gonna tell us about that. And the conversation with Cao Fei will be about what the visitor can see or could see would the gallery be open in these in these two kitchens. And I was, of course, super excited when Cao Fei came up with this idea of installing, two kitchens at the Serpentine, because it connects very much to how everything started for me with curating, because my first exhibition happened in a kitchen. I found actually the catalog yesterday. This is the kitchen in St. Gallen, where in 1991 we did World Soup, and where Fischli Weiss, installed a kind of a kitchen altar in the kitchen with oversized quantities of food. And Hans-Peter Fellmann said that he doesn't want to exhibit in the kitchen, so he wanted to do an exhibition in the fridge. So this is the fridge exhibition of Fellmann with the feathers and the eggs. So it's almost like a Russian matrushka. And in a way, the two virtual reality kitchens are also a kind of a Russian matrushka in the Serpentine show. A very warm welcome to Daniel Birnbaum.
Thank you. No, so I would want to start with some, maybe first a little explanation and then a few questions. And it's true that we've done many things together in more traditional formats and, museum shows and biennales. And I'm very happy that we continue this collaboration in the world of new technologies. And no one could be more relevant for this conversation than Cao Fei, an artist who has always been, using new technical possibilities and to explore the philosophical and poetic potentials of these new possibilities. And I would say, when a new technology emerges, there's always a window of a few years where no one understands anything and everybody exaggerates, and it's an interesting period. Say when photography emerged in the around the 1850, there were all these confusions and exaggerations, and people said that photography was a ghost-like discipline, a kind of esoteric science, or that it would kill painting and many other things. And great things came out of it, but the years when no one knew what it was they were quite interesting. And it seems that every century there's like once or twice a major paradigm shift when entirely new technical possibilities emerge. And in the 20th century, we all know it was then film, and later on radio and television and video art, and and then the internet. And I actually think that VR and AR, and I presume that in a few years they will merge into, for some of the technologists, the engineers that we work with, they're kind of the same. They say we can render all of this, and then it's up to you, the curator or the artist, if you want to place it in a headset or on the telephone. And of course, for us, from a curatorial point of view and an artistic point of view, it's an enormous difference if the piece emerges only on a telephone. You can reach much more people, or if it's in a headset. And it's now a few years ago that I was, invited to propose projects for this little startup laboratory called Acute Art, which has actually grown a little bit, and now it produces a number of works. And Cao Fei was one of the very first artists that we thought of. We thought that she's ideal because she's so open-minded and interested in these things, and she will come up with something that will surprise us. And I couldn't agree more with Marina Abramovic, who you quoted, that this is the most sophisticated piece of artistic VR actually produced, I think. And it's a dense piece of digital engineering, but it's also a perfectly what should I say, a perfectly integrated part of a bigger show. And that is very much thanks to Joseph and you, Hans, and your dialogue with Cao Fei, that it's not just the kind of VR experience in some techie world, because I have been a little bit not critical, but a little bit bored actually with the fact that VR is treated as something which is a ghetto of itself. And we have presented some VR pieces in very traditional contexts like art fairs and museum shows, but often in the corner with two headsets. And it's a little bit as if it were, something totally strange and outside. And it's new. So in a way it has been. But what I find very interesting with Cao Fei's show in London now, and I'm curious how this will develop with you, Philip, is how it's actually integrated, and, the same experiences, or kind of the same experiences are experienced as echoes of each other. You know, that you have the physical kitchen, you have the kitchen in your own memory, you have the kitchen in the film, you have the kitchen that you've heard of, I've never been in it, in the studio in Beijing, and then you enter this kitchen as a physical replica, and you put on the headset, and there it is again, but now in VR, and you know, so you start in the most everyday of contexts, like your kitchen in St. Gallen, Hans, but actually a Chinese kitchen with a very special history. And that's where the whole thing starts. And it's a kind of a, I don't know, a surreal or a science fiction-like journey. It was interesting to hear Tarkovsky's name, because I can understand that this is a kind of, it has sci-fi components, this. And I mean, maybe just to start somewhere, Cao Fei, I would actually ask you, why is it important that it starts in the everyday? I mean, in VR, you can do anything. You can start on the planet, Pluto. You could start on Saturn or in a place that doesn't exist. But you actually start in your home, or rather not home, but in your everyday life, which is your studio and that kitchen. It's anchored in something very normal, and then the crazy journey starts, or the surprising journey with very very science fiction-like experiences. But why did you start in your own kitchen?
First of all, the kitchen is not a modern kitchen in our life in Beijing. We built like a kitchen is 1917 and 1980 style of Chinese kitchen, and that because the kitchen is in the Hongxia Cinema. Actually, is no kitchen original in Hongxia Cinema, but when we rent this space, we think about we should have a kitchen in the cinema as a studio use it. And also, if future we're making a film in this cinema, we should have like use this big cinema as a scenes. So we build a living room outside, and we build a kitchen is in the original office. So it's kind of a set in the cinema. It's like a film in the cinema. That's what our original plan. So when we have the VR plan, make the new piece, I think about, because we travel a lot of space, like a computer scientist room, lab, and outside of the cinema and inside of the cinema. So I think it's like the kitchen is like a portal. It's like
an entry.
The engine of the whole VR, and it's like a retro entrance. It's like an old school retro. Even you put on your headset, you don't know where you are, but you're in the kitchen in a 1980, 1970 kitchen. So that means you have a new journey. It's going back or going to the future, from the back to the future and back to the back. So it's confused. And also, its kitchen is the nature of the like a daily life. The magic always happen in your daily life, right? In your everyday life. So I think kitchen is very good beginning. And as it's like what you say is looping. It's like VR kitchen, physical kitchen in the museum, in the Serpentine, and the kitchen also film in the Nova. And also people hear about have a kitchen in Hongxia Cinema. So it's like looping the theme, the kitchen again and again in the show up the kitchen in the story. But that is not important, because it's a kitchen. It's not universal. It's not in a mass. It's not a laboratory. So it's like seems it's normal daily entrance. Yeah.
Interesting what you say, that the most mysterious and magical of experiences actually tend to start in the everyday. And I mean, we looked at your piece not only with Marina Abramovic, but also with Olafur Eliasson, two other artists that we're working with. And Olafur was also very, very impressed by it. And it's interesting to think that, you know, we produced this augmented reality piece with him that was just launched, which he calls Wunderkammer. And Wunderkammer is actually, about wondrous things, about miracles. And I wondered a little bit, why is it called Wunderkammer? Because you show the most ordinary of things, a cloud, a bird, a rock. And he said, well, the most mysterious and miraculous is, in the everyday. The extraordinary is inside the ordinary. So it's very much the same approach that, if you only produce things that are totally far out and sci-fi like, maybe they don't have the same narrative or poetic effect. They have to be anchored in the everyday. And I'm curious about one thing that, I saw your Nova film and loved it already in Paris, where I think it was originally premiered. And then I looked at it and I saw the VR piece being produced. And I was wondering a little bit how they relate. I mean, technically I can understand how they relate. It's kind of clear, but psychologically, poetically, would you say that, you've seen the film and you remember these things, and it's a very strong film, and I remember certain atmospheres and spaces, and then you put on that VR headset. First you enter the physical kitchen, then you're in the kitchen, and then you encounter some of the protagonists again. How would you relate? Is this like a fantasy about the film? Suddenly you enter the film. You just said that you become the ghost yourself because you're in the film, but as a ghost-like presence because you have no body. And then you see some of the people from the film. Is it like a memory of the film, or is it like a fantasy about the film, or is the film becoming real and it's your real life? How would you explain, or how do you think that people should or will relate to the film through the VR piece? You get a glimpse of things that you only had an idea of. The romance between the scientists becomes very visible when you see them kissing in the laboratory, and suddenly you're back in the story, but you see it very close up. And is it like you're dreaming about the film, or is it like you're remembering the film, or is it like you continue the film in your own life? Or how would you think, that one should understand the relationship between the VR experience, which is only 15 minutes, and the long film?
I think first of all, the VR is for archive purpose, right? We scan the community around the cinema, and we scan the whole building of the cinema. So a lot of corner of the cinema we can't access, but we use very high-tech scan. We can scan the floor, we can scan the underneath of the cinema. So then we have the digital base data of the cinema, right? Even the demolish, we can reconstruct this in model, in 3D, and even we can rebuild cinema in the future, in 100 years later. So I think first important, also we make all this old style computer, the first computer of Chinese and China, so we rebuild all the product China developed in 1950. So that's archive of the building and archive of the technology product. So for this reason, is archive reason. So VR could be the data for the project itself. And secondly, I think it's very complicated. It's like a reflection of the reflection. Is the film have a lot of layer, and then also the VR have all the different layer. Is also independent and relate the film, and also many audience didn't see the film, but they can have totally independently feeling of this VR piece. Could be no relation with the film, right? Yeah. And if you finish the film, and also immediately you will make sense that you met the people in the VR. It's like extend your feeling, like you walk in the film.
Yeah.
And maybe you are the actor, you are the father, or you are the son to experience the memory. You saw your father dating with people. You saw the laboratory. It's like a repeat experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
come very close. I mean, you come very, very close to these people. The man who wants your ticket in the cinema, the lady, I mean, watching the film, you sit just next to her, the little boy who approaches you. I mean, you're very close to them, closer than you could ever be watching a traditional film. I guess
yeah.
that is the kind of power of immersive technologies and particularly VR.
Yeah.
And
also in the film, a lot of people talk to you, right? And so you are the like a main, like the film 叫做什么主观镜怎么说？主观镜头，就镜头你自己，你去拍别人跟你说话。
Right, like you're the subject, the main character, right? Looking out on the other people.
No, I mean, in VR, you're at the center of everything. I mean, it's clearly that you can watch and you can, you know, as I said, get a glimpse of some secret romance and, you know, certain things that maybe you're not supposed to see, but you do see them and you're at the center of things. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how, although I'm not an historian and I don't know very little about digital histories, but at least one has some sort of idea of, you know, the Cold War developments in the US with the, you know, IBM or MIT and you know, at least it's something I've read articles about and one has some sort of understanding that what American computing, how they developed and IBM's history and all of that. But for someone like me, the Russian history is, I mean, I know nil, nothing. And the Chinese, maybe, if possible, even less. And it's interesting to know that these superpowers had these collaborative, I mean, it was a Chinese-Russian collaboration somehow to develop these first computers. And now it's interesting how technology and art has this dialogue. And I would say that the dominant trend in 20th century art has not necessarily been one of enthusiasm when it comes to technology. There are exceptions, like maybe futurism or Russian constructivism, and you know, futurism is a kind of proto-fascist movement, so quite problematic. And then there are exceptions with what Hans Ulrich mentioned, EAT, experiments in art and technology, and there's always Nam Yuen Paik, and today we have Laurie Anderson, and we have you, and we have people who really explore this. But I mean, in a way, maybe I can go a little bit beyond the VR piece and ask, you know, you've always been curious about the new possibilities. I don't know any other Second Life piece as ambitious as yours. So it seems that you're always like looking for the new and to integrate this. And I'm wondering, will you continue doing VR and AR? And what do you think?
Look at the second line. Even like my son today is playing different like online social media game called Roblox. Like the kid, yeah, teenage, they're playing like Minecraft, Roblox.
Yeah.
They're all the kids and teenage playing. And it's like a simple version of Second Life. But it's like more young generation playing that. But I look in the tech. I think the hard core of this online virtual media community, I think it's not a big leap compare Second Life. Even Second Life, I think it's really avant-garde. It's not too much the recent online platform can beyond that. That is it. So when you invite me doing this project, I talking about if you're doing something on virtual reality VR, that is 2016. Yeah. You invite me. So we have doing something beyond that because I feel I touching the ceiling of this technology because it's difficult to develop. It's It's like we spend so many time on the virtual platform, social media, but we still feeling we are alone. Yeah, still feeling something is lost, strongly lost. The whole generation. Also, I can't imagine my kids. Their generation is they all kids. They want to be a YouTuber.
Huh.
Yeah, they don't want to doing job. They say they want to be a YouTuber. They don't think artist is a future because not too much fans follow artists Instagram, but
Right.
million and million fans follow YouTuber, and also they can make money. So yeah, so going back our topic is when you're asking me, I think emotion is very important for the VRP because I saw so many VRPs. Some is very tech, right? Some is very, you know, it's like entertain, like rah, something like this, right? I don't feel emotion can give the audience to feeling that because that is very important because with headset, very heavy headset, and the people helping you give you a notice, you know, in the museum, have an assistant, have a guide. Look at here, touching the table. Be careful. You have to step. You know, all these things disrupt you the experience of VR.
Yep.
So also the content is difficult. So I think we make it. Yeah, in our piece, I think is we give the sense to people, and also people can feel the emotion.
Yeah, there is a strong moment of empathy in it, and it is really a great piece, and we are so grateful to you and to Daniel and to Jacob and Acute, and I think there could not be a better transition now to the third part. As I said initially, this is a conversation in 3 parts, and we're now so delighted to welcome Philip Tinari. Phil, similar to Daniel, you and I have worked for almost 20 years on many different things, often related to Cao Fei. And now we're going to talk about the future, about an exhibition you and Cao Fei are going to discuss, which is going to be Cao Fei's next big project, and a very important show because it will be Cao Fei's first very big exhibition in Beijing. And of course, Phil, you and I did this book together with Karen Mata about the future a few years ago, where Cao Fei actually participated and outlined her idea for the future. And talking about the future, of course, you are also ahead of the curve to us in terms of reopening the museum, because we are still in London in lockdown, and the museum is of course closed. You are already reopening UCCA now. So we are very delighted to welcome now Phil Tinari.
Thank you. No, I mean, it's really exciting for us to be looking ahead. The show, which is really going to be, I mean, it's kind of amazing when you think about the Chinese art system and the international art system, that you can have an artist like Cao Fei, who's shown in major institutions, you know, all over the world, in New York and London and Paris and so many other places, Dusseldorf. But you know, for whatever reason, there has not been a show of really any like major scale. I remember a few years ago when you did the BMW art car, which was also a wonderful project, and there was a giant launch for that. It was almost as if like that was kind of in the place of a large presentation. So, you know, I think we've had this idea to make a show together already for, I think, 5 years now, right? I think going back to 2015, 2016, we began talking. You know, a lot of things happened with UCCA, a lot of things happened with Cao Fei, and now a lot of things happen with this virus. So the show should have been already opening in September of this year, but like everything, you know, there's this delay. We think it's actually going to be great to open it in the springtime next year. Hopefully by then, you know, more things will be back to some kind of normal, and it will mean that more people can see the show and interact with it. And I think it's just so important to, you know, we have this tradition in UCCA of doing really substantial presentations of, you know, who we really believe are the key figures of Chinese art, alongside also an international program and more thematic kinds of shows. But this fits very squarely in this tradition of major exhibitions we've done with figures like Xu Bing and Qiu Zhijie, so many others over the years. The interesting thing, actually, one of the most interesting things is that, the neighborhood Hans Ulrich mentioned, Jiuxianqiao, is the neighborhood, Hongxia is a part of that neighborhood. 798 is actually another part of that neighborhood. So, thinking about like the context, to be able to show some of the work we were just talking about kind of in actually the place where it originates or the place that it's evocative of is just so, it's quite different, but it's also quite exciting. So maybe that's my question for Cao Fei, is just, how do you think about these different levels, first of having, presenting your work on a large scale to a Chinese audience in Beijing, but then also presenting work that's so much about, this very part of Beijing and this particular history, from which also the buildings of UCCA and of 798, as well as your studio, as well as, the whole Hongxia area, from where they all grow.
I think I'm very excited to also very expect this show. I think delay because the virus, I think is how to say, maybe it's good we have more time to think about the show, right? And also maybe after the virus, we will have another thinking about the experience of the show, so how to give the experience to the audience of these periods. And I think having a show in China is so important for me. Even I have shown in America, in Germany, in London. But for me, having a show in China is particular, how to say, is not easy, because like what Philip Tinari said, is he mentioned he first time to invite me in 2015. And then it's totally 5 years. It's so difficult. And also during this year and some other museum asking me to doing show here and there, but I always say I want to keep the show for the UCCA. The first solo traditional local show in Beijing. For me, I think in China is most academic private museum in China, that is UCCA. And then we have publication, right? We have academic team to go through all these words, and I think it's how to say, it's very important, I think, yeah. And also Hongxia's cinema, the project I working on is just next the 798. They are brother, it's like a sister and brother factory next each other. That is very important for the local audience to look at this project and think about this project. And because if you show you build a Hongxia cinema in Serpentine, but it's hard for audience to see the real Hongxia theater. But in Beijing, after show, hopefully we can visit the Hongxia theater and look at the real kitchen. That also is very special experience, not only through the VRPs. For sure, we have to have this VRPs. That is totally different. It's more dimension. Because in London, we have VR experience and film experience, but in Beijing, we have the real experience. That is gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and show my work in front of my home. If you look at my Instagram, I can look at my fans, follower. Most follower, 60% follower is from New York. And then London, and then I think the fourth is Shanghai. The fifth is Beijing. The Beijing is like only like a 5% follower from my Instagram. So you can see most of my art fans is not based in China. So that means I think the UCC also important is for the student, for the audience. They know my name and know some of my works and some information from internet, but they never see totally the whole body of my work. That is also very important for the local audience. Yeah,
yeah, and it's so, I think it's so interesting too, because like when you have these major exhibitions abroad, a lot of effort needs to be put into just explaining like the context, right? You have to talk about economic reform in China, you have to talk about Canton and the difference with Beijing, you have to talk about youth culture and manufacturing and all these different things. But I'm super excited just for the chance to be able to create a different kind of encounter that in a way doesn't have to do the same work of conveying that information and establishing that context. And I think in a way that may free us to, you know, approach them more from a poetic or aesthetic level. And also I'm excited for the resonance that people will feel with the work, because so many of these stories are also their stories, right? I mean, these are stories of a generation and of a country in transition. So, you know, I mean, it's like kind of incredible that this body of work in a way has been missing from the people, you know, for whom it in a way is probably the most relevant, the most direct, and the most compelling even. I mean, it's compelling internationally, obviously, as well, but, you know, I just think there's going to be a whole new generation of people who will come to a whole different idea and understanding of art through this show. So I'm so excited to work on it with you, and we have a lot of work still ahead. I think. But,
yeah, because the space is so big, I think it's the biggest solo space for my all the solo show. So I think it's very challenging. The ceiling is very high. So, but I think in the show we have future, we have recent, we have past, like Nisha cinema is just next block, and probably we will have the VR, the future, in our show, Daniel, right? Yeah. And
he agreed.
But I remember Philip Tinari in maybe 2008 sent me a message from phone, and you saw my eye mirror work in my New York gallery show. You say you are crying after see the eye mirror. Because eye mirror is filming in second line, right? Is like a pre-virtual reality community. So that's what I want to keep doing in like the VR piece. I work with Daniel how to make emotion just because the tech, the social media is very cold-blooded, is cold, right? So I think it's how we can form the emotion, the human being in this platform. That is what the major reason why I'm interested to looking for technology. Even the R&B City is about a connection, doing an activity. It's not just about the technology, about just fascinating about the future.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, you talked about Second Life, and in Second Life, your avatar was called China Tracy, right? So, I mean, of course, she was a projection of you, and it was a different kind of virtual world. But I think there's a way in which your story is a story. I mean, you are a kind of an avatar for this whole, you know, this generation born alongside opening and reform. You know, that's been through all of these different, I won't quite call them upheavals, but these very fast developments, and this kind of really incredible range of historical and technological and ideological moments, you know, crammed into the space of just 40 years and a little bit more. So yeah, it's exciting to think about trying to put that all out in front of a larger public and just see how they react.
Great, but thank you so much. This is end of part 3. Thank you so much to Cao Fei, to Daniel, to Phil. And now we have a small postscriptum because I had 2 very last questions. I wanted to ask Cao Fei to tell us about Do It, because of course during the lockdown of the last 2 months, something very interesting has happened. I initially got quite a lot of alerts already in January, February from China, also on WeChat, about Do It being revisited, and people, during lockdown, taking the books back or, from the shelf and realizing some of these artists' instructions, having sort of turned to Do It during the quarantine. And then the same happened with Italy and many other European countries. So we actually decided to look at that. And whilst, of course, physical mobility is restricted, there can be a way of experiencing life beyond one's immediate circumstances. Paul Chan always says that connecting is great, but it's actually de-linking, which is sublime. And it seems at a moment of the last 2 months, where and in China actually much longer, since January, where so many people spend most of their time in front of screens, it seemed important to also think about projects where we can go off screen and think again about doing that. So we started a new Do It with the Google Cultural Institute and the Serpentine, and also with ICI and John Calder projects in Australia. And Cao Fei, you have been part of Do It from the very beginning, and you did a wonderful Do It piece more than 10 years ago, giving an instruction of how to make a film. And now during the lockdown, you've actually posted on social media a new Do It idea about finding eyes in one's apartment. Can you talk a little bit about Do It?
Yeah, actually, in a very early Do It book, yeah, the English version and then the Chinese version. I think it's very a special time for us to review or redo it, and it's very interesting. Is because Singapore now is locked down. I think in American or a lot of European countries, cities locked down too. So in this lockdown timing, we will focus very, it's very closely in your home. Everything is like a zoom out in your space. So one day I wake up, I look at my floor, I can see a lot of eyes on the wood pattern. It's really like an eye, and the eye with a tear. And then I try to take photo of all the eyes on the wood. And then I do it on Instagram. It's like counting how many eyes in your home. So if it's not in the lockdown day, every day we go out, we look at the email, but now we have much more time to look out of the window and look at at midnight, I look at outside of the street. Everything is like extend. I think is abstract time to make the conceptual art is coming up again, and that's why people will think about the Do It time. So I think it's good timing for new Do It in this isolation period.
Can we post your new Do It on our social media with the eyes? Because I really love it with your photo. Can we publish it?
Sure.
Great. And then I wanted to ask you about TikTok, because one of the things I started during the lockdown is I joined TikTok, and it has actually to do with this book by Vincent Després, What Would Animals Say If We Ask the Right Questions? Bruno Latour says it's an amazing book because you're about to enter a new genre, that of scientific fables, by which I don't mean science fiction or false stories about science, but on the contrary, true ways of understanding how difficult it really is to figure out what animals are up to. So I started for TikTok to interview every day animals on my daily walk in the park about their unrealized project, and that has become my TikTok account. I wanted to ask you about TikTok and what, if you are on TikTok, and what you think about it.
Have to be animal?
No, it can be. It's just your own approach. I wanted to ask you if what you are doing with TikTok. Are you on it, or are you using it, or what do you think of TikTok? I was just curious about your opinion on TikTok.
就什么是 TikTok?
抖音
Oh, I didn't play on that. I didn't have that, so sorry. So 是抖音吗？是它的那个 Instagram 的快拍？
没有抖音的海外版叫 TikTok， 是一个东西。
Okay. So I didn't play on that. So yeah. But I watching your TikTok on your Instagram. And you every day.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it's actually the beginning of artists joining TikTok. It's a bit like, you know, many years ago when all of a sudden on Instagram, many artists started to join. I felt like over the last weeks, you know, many more artists started to join TikTok. Mariam Benani did a piece on TikTok, and Precious Okoyomon joined TikTok. So it's kind of interesting.
I have an important thing to say about your animal project, which is a quote from Ludwig Wittgenstein. It's from Uncertainty über Gewissheit, where he says, if the lion would speak, you wouldn't understand what it says. Wenn der Löwe sprechen könnte, wir würden ihn nicht verstehen.
I think this is such a wonderful conclusion, Daniel, of today's event. We are so grateful, of course, to the Gallery Beijing Weekend, and wish all the best. And all my thanks go, of course, to Cao Fei on our all behalf, of Bettina Korek, of the co-curator, Joseph Constable, of myself, of our teams for this amazing show. All our thanks to Daniel Birnbaum and Acute, and to Philip Tinari, and of course, foremost to Cao Fei. Wishing you all a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
Thank
It was
you.
fun.